It is a mitzvah to return a lost object to its owner. That might seem like a fairly obvious thing to do, but what's not so obvious is why Jewish law considers returning things to be such a major mitzvah. There are 8 chapters devoted entirely to lost and found in the Mishnah Torah, the comprehensive code of Jewish law by the philosopher and rabbi Moses Maimonides. To start with the basics, the name for this mitzvah is Hashavat Avedah. Hashavat means returning of, from the same word as teshuvah, changing ourselves by returning. And Avedah is something lost. The first thing you're supposed to do when you find an item is to figure out whether it has signs that it belongs to somebody else, or is the kind of thing that is easily disregarded, even by someone who might have owned it. This part of the laws is fairly common sense. Look for a name or some other kind of identifier, obviously. But also, it makes a difference if the item has indications that it was made or assembled by someone, even if you can't tell who at first glance. The Mishnah gives the examples of a pouch of coins, or a stack of 3 coins, or a loaf of bread with coins inside it, or a loaf of bread with a distinctive shape different from the typical loaf sold in the market. These look like things someone cared about, put together with intention. If an object looks like it might belong to someone, Jewish law says you have to hold onto it and make a public announcement. Anyone who claims the lost item would have to tell its identifying marks. Otherwise, you are not obligated to give it to the person. And here's where the mitzvah goes beyond the obvious. There is one view in the Mishnah that you have to wait for a cycle of the 3 annual pilgrimage festivals to be completed before giving up finding the owner. There is a tradition that in the Second Temple in Jerusalem, there was actually a lost and found known as the Claimer's Stone, Even To'en, where people would announce lost objects on the festivals and come to look for them there. After a time, if the owner doesn't materialize, then the owner is considered to have given up hope of finding their lost object, and the finder can keep it. Before the time is up, the person with the lost object is obligated to take care of it, to make sure it's in good condition, or if it's a living thing, to make sure it doesn't get lost again. If it's a scroll, the Mishnah says it should be unrolled and read from each month. There are responsibilities for another person's lost animals. The finder has to take care of them and even use them for work and certainly feed them. That's how the Torah introduces this whole mitzvah in the first place, by talking about animals that have wandered off. As you can imagine, this itself is a complicated area of Hashevat Avedah because there are costs that go with taking care of an animal, even if it's an animal that you might not ever find the owner of. Where does the spiritual force behind Hashavat Avedah come from? One is the general Jewish concept that I've talked about before, that possession does not come with unlimited rights. Possession as often comes with obligations and limits. It's always a covenant between us and God, and that's even when I do own outright the thing that's in my possession. We are, in some sense, always borrowers from the divine, even when we are not holding on to someone else's lost item, but something that's actually our own. But we can also zero in on the 2 words that label this mitzvah, Hashavat Avedah. Hashavat, the returning of, comes from the word shuv, which means to go back or return, both literally and spiritually. I've already taught in this series about shuvah, going back as the central spiritual practice in Judaism of reviewing our deeds, going over them, and if we did wrong and find ourselves returning to a similar situation, then choosing a different action. Lost objects remind us of our own misplaced souls, which we are always seeking and which depend on others to bring us back to. Lost objects remind us that the world is full of good things that aren't always where they belong. Ideas and ideals and purposes, when they are not actively being made real, it's not because they don't exist, but just because they have wandered off, become detached from the people they belong to. In the Torah, the first Avedah, the original lost item, is the Jewish people. We were lost in Egypt, away from our domain, the place where we did our essential work and were nourished. The divine found us, cared for us in the wilderness while we were still lost, and returned us. Lost and found is the foundation of our story. The whole Exodus story is Hashavat Avedah. So every time we stop and notice a lost object and try to return it, we are trying to imitate the divine.